With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Glenn Moore, VP of Marketing at ANX. And just a background on Glenn. Glenn joined ANX in August of 2008 with more than 20 years of experience in B2B marketing and sales, including strategic product planning, development, marketing, direct sales management, and administration. Glenn has also served as Vice President of Commercial Marketing at LDMI Talk America and Marketing Director at Cavalier Telephone. Prior to joining LDMI in 2000, Glenn managed various sales and marketing business units at MCI Telecommunications for 15 years. Glenn holds a bachelor's and master's degree in telecommunications from Michigan State University. For our webinar today, Glenn will discuss PCI best practices for merchants and processors and really how to get the most out of PCI for your franchisees. With that, let's dive into the presentation. Glenn, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks Chan, and good morning everyone. I'm glad they put this picture of me up here because for those of you who don't know, it's Movember. It's Men's Cancer Awareness Month, and I'm growing a mustache in solidarity to that effort, and I can tell you it doesn't look too good, so I'm thankful for this picture here. The corporate franchise structure has proven to be an absolute magnet for data breaches, and that trend really isn't changing anytime soon. So in the next 20 minutes or so, it might take a little bit longer, but I'm definitely going to try to get done in 30 to 40 minutes and leave time for questions. I'm going to touch on the state of data breach today, really cover the who, what, when, where, and how of data breach, and specifically how it's affecting the franchise structure. I'll then comment on the relationship between data breach and PCI compliance, they are related, and the unique challenges of preventing data breach in the corporate franchise structure. So there's a lot of unique challenges that those of you who are involved in the corporate world understand. But then I'm going to spend most of the time discussing 5 practical steps that corporate compliance officers can implement very quickly and without a lot of money to reduce the risk of data breach. So this isn't going to be a 6-month and $100,000 type address. It's going to be things you can do before the end of the year that are going to make your franchise location safer. And finally, I'll just offer up a few brief comments at the end about how ANX can help if you choose to engage us. So let's start out by taking a look at data breach by the numbers. It's, like I said, it's a nasty problem that's costing American businesses literally billions of dollars a year. And every business that accepts a credit card is a target. But as you'll see in the next few minutes, franchise locations are the sweet spot for cyber criminals. Restaurants and retailers are the clear target of cyber criminals. An astounding 79%, I'll repeat, 79% of data breaches involve hackers targeting these types of businesses. Now here's a closer look at reported data breaches by industry. The food and service industry is far and away the most victimized with 52% of the breaches. Retail is second with 27%, and no other industry on this chart has a double-digit percentage. So if you're on the call and with associated with restaurants or a retail chain, this is going to be especially pertinent for you. The distribution hasn't always been that lopsided. The restaurant sector's share of these breaches climbed from 21% to 41% over the last 5 years. So cybercrime has thrived in this sector for a couple reasons. One, it's very lucrative. Each breach can yield thousands of credit cards, and it's relatively easy. We'll get into that in a couple of minutes. So drilling deeper into the breach problem indicates that the level 4 merchants are being victimized the most. And you might say, why? Well, these locations have less sophisticated defenses, and cyber criminals deploy a host of both low-tech and high-tech tactics to steal information. You're going to hear a lot about the low-tech because that is very effective, and it's easy to prevent against, but people aren't taking the necessary steps to protect against low tech. Now let's examine data breaches by system type. Software point-of-sale systems lead the way with 67% of reported compromises. Criminals target the data stored on premise servers and POS devices. Shopping cart systems come in a distant second at 25%, and other back-end components represent 7% of the data breaches. So what does all this mean for the franchise structure? It's huge risk with obvious crippling consequences. The cost of a single data breach can easily exceed $200,000. And for starters, it costs around $20,000 just for an internal forensic audit. Then there's the cost to reissue cards, which can reach $50 per card. And then you add in fines, lost business, and, just for good measure, higher operating costs. So an astonishing 76% of small businesses that experience a customer data breach go out of business within a year. Now those costs are at the franchise level. A data breach also impacts the corporate brand. That's always the hardest impact to measure, but the effects are very tangible. A new survey of 850 executives found that data breaches have long-term effects on a brand's value. At best, their brand's value lost 12% of its value, or up to 1/4 of the brand's value in some cases. That's really amazing. That impact easily exceeds the direct costs of fines and card replacement. The survey said it also takes an average of 1 year for a victim organization to restore its reputation after a data breach. So those of you looking to put together an ROI justification for your security spend, you should check out this report. And I have the URL listed below, and we'll also be emailing you a replay and these materials. So definitely encourage you to download this report and read it. Because it really is quantified through this survey impacts to the brand based on a data breach. So let's take a closer look at the who is behind data breaches, how they occur, and what commonalities exist. First, the who. 92% involve external agents, and 17% of the time there is some help provided by insiders such as employees. To me, it's somewhat surprising that less than 1% are business partners, and 9% involve multiple parties. How do breaches occur? 50% utilize some form of hacking. 49% incorporated malware, such as a keystroke logger. 29% involve physical attacks, such as stealing a computer. 17% resulted from privilege misuse, and 11% employed social media tactics. Now, what commonalities exist? Well, for starters, 83% of victims were targets of opportunity, and a surprising 92% of attacks were not highly difficult. They were easy. People just weren't prepared. 76% of data was compromised from servers, 86% were discovered by a third party, and 96% were avoidable through simple controls. And finally, 89% of the people that had a data breach were not PCI compliant. Now, there's a popular misconception out there that PCI compliance means your data is 100% secure. Now, of course, that isn't the case. Even the most diligent company that meets all 250 plus PCI requirements can be breached. However, being PCI compliant does greatly reduce the risk of data breach. In fact, organizations that are breached are 50% less likely to be PCI compliant. And PCI compliance thoroughly addresses the top 10 threat actions leading to a data compromise. So, this is one of the cases where a compliance standard really got it right. Become and remain PCI compliant, and your chance of suffering a crippling data breach is greatly diminished. Another way to look at causes of breach is to evaluate PCI DSS violations of companies that suffered a compromise. This chart breaks down the 12 major PCI requirements and which ones were not addressed by breached companies. The number one area of non-compliance was not having a good written security policy. Not having something written in place is a good indication that information security was not an important issue for that business. And when we get to the tips portion of this presentation, I'll give you some practical ways to address this very quickly. The other common areas of non-compliance include protection of stored data, logging and monitoring access to card data, testing security systems and process, and finally installing and maintaining an effective firewall. Many of the locations that were breached have the mistaken understanding that because they purchased a compliant POS system that they were PCI compliant. Now that's of course not even close to being the case. These victims shared weak system configurations, operating system flaws, and a major lack of staff awareness. With data breach, the adage of what we don't know can hurt us the most is especially true. Now, for the corporate compliance officer, ensuring that franchise locations are PCI compliant is a lot like herding cats. Both are magnificent beasts, but are extremely difficult to control. Even well-intentioned franchise locations find the complexity of information security and PCI compliance extremely daunting. They lack the expertise and resources of larger businesses. And for many corporate franchise models, PCI compliance is not something that has been operationalized into the franchise model. They're being told from different parties to become PCI compliant, but they are not provided much guidance. Given this situation, it's an uphill battle for most franchise locations to become fully PCI compliant, and hence reduce the risk of data breach. PCI DSS contains over 250 requirements, and for many level 4 merchants, it's going to take a long time for them to meet all of them. So really, meeting all 250 should not be the immediate goal, even though it really is, but let's be pragmatic about this. Starting now is really what's most important, and focusing first on the areas of PCI compliance that yield the most benefits. Many forward-thinking corporate compliance officers are developing opt-in PCI compliance programs for their independently owned franchise locations. Those programs are much needed and very helpful. However, adoption rates vary greatly from chain to chain, and the need to reduce risk now is really acute. To help you drive some immediate value, I put together 5 practical steps to reduce the risk of data breach. These can be rolled out quickly and are implementable literally within days and weeks, and not months or years. So let's review the steps you can take right now to prevent data breach disaster. As I discussed earlier, low-tech data breaches are extremely common. They rely, and they absolutely rely, on an uneducated front line at the merchant location. And the single best step you can take is to implement a PCI Awareness Training program for all employees that handle credit cards. Now, there's some wonderful programs out there to make it easy to train your employees. Now, we happen to have a great one that we sponsor, but that's not the point here. I'm not pushing our approach, although we'd be happy to take questions on it or provide you more information. The main point is get something out there and make that the first thing that you do. So a good awareness program should really help employees understand things like, what's the definition of sensitive data? You know, how do you handle sensitive data? What precautions should employees take to physically protect equipment? Sounds common sense, but there's a lot of non-common sense out there. How do you dispose of sensitive data? What is suspicious behavior? Give them examples. Then what do they do about the suspicious behavior when they see it? So let's take a closer look at the type of employee training that can make an immediate impact on risk reduction. And I think by showing you a couple examples, I think it drives home the point. So these are some screenshots from the ANX online PCI awareness course. So it's designed to provide an easy to digest information in both video and text format. There's also some quiz questions that pop up during the course to ensure that employees are really grasping the content. So this screen here describes the highly successful but low-tech practice of dumpster diving. So really, knowledge is power. and making sure that employees are aware of this practice. It might not be sexy, but it sure drives value and can prevent a catastrophe. So just by reminding people that people are diving through dumpsters looking for paper copies of things is something that can prevent a disaster. This shot here raises awareness of locking up sensitive information, locking doors, to equipment rooms, locking your papers in your desk if you have an administrative job. Just simple things like that can make a big difference. Another common exploit is falling victim to scams where passwords are disclosed. So raising the issue that no legitimate person will ever ask you for your password is an important training point. Another common mistake that many employees make is disabling malware software or personal firewall settings on their PC. They do that to make their PC run faster, or they get frustrated. But anyway, they do something that makes their PC dangerous for a malware invasion. And malware such as keystroke loggers or other forms of self-executing programs can attach themselves to a computer. So they need to understand not to do that and what the ramifications are for turning off things like Norton antivirus. Email scams are especially effective with people who aren't suspicious enough. So teaching employees not to open email from unknown sources is really important. They also need to be mindful of clicking on suspicious looking links and attachments. And short quizzes like this can help cement the understanding. So participation and comprehension reports show both the franchise owner and the corporate compliance manager the status of the training. So a good training approach will record all this, tell you which employees took the test, what their scores were, and that's part of PCI compliance anyway, to keep records of that. But it's going to really tell you a lot about which locations are on board with your programs and which are not. Another commonly overlooked knowledge point is how to fully delete information. Again, seems like common sense, but not every employee understands how to properly delete information. And then it persists, and that's a problem. Another helpful area of training is how to spot and report suspicious looking behavior. So people posing as vendors or contractors asking unusual questions is a common ploy. So I think you get the point on training. You really don't want to delay on this one. Find a vendor to help your franchise locations get it done. Now, we'd love to help, but at least find someone to partner in this effort. Okay, the next practical step recommendation is to standardize your remote access approach. Now, weak remote access is one of the top root causes for data breach. Many employees and store managers use the least expensive version of a go-to-my remote desktop type product. I won't name names, but I think you know who I'm talking about. Now, while those solutions are easy to implement and relatively inexpensive, they really don't provide enough safeguards against malware transmission. So it's important to have remote access that ensures that endpoint computers are running the latest anti-malware software, are patched to the latest operating system revision levels, and have personal firewall turned on. So remote PCs that don't meet these conditions should never be allowed to connect to store environments where sensitive information is stored. Keystroke loggers and other self-extracting programs can traverse from the infected PC to the merchant server. It's also important for remote access users to use two-factor authentication, which greatly diminishes the risks associated with hacked access. Another important feature is availability of remote access logging and reporting. So not only having it, but using it. So business owners at the franchise level should be taught to review remote access logs really on a weekly level to see who's accessing merchant data and really when. Stuff happening in the middle of the night, weird times, who's logging in. Doesn't take long to teach someone to look at a log to spot some unusual behavior. So really that leads to the last point. It's critical to restrict remote access to individuals that only need it. The corporate compliance manager can easily improve remote access by educating franchise owners on which remote access methods and vendors are viable. And really, don't leave this one up to the franchise. Dictate an approach or a list of approved vendors. Now, ANX has a cloud-based remote access solution that works with existing hardware. It provides unsurpassed endpoint security, 24/7 support for end users, and can be deployed in literally hours. So if you haven't paid attention to remote access, contact us for a demo. My third practical step is to mandate or recommend a common firewall approach across the franchise community. So underpowered or improperly configured firewalls is a frequently exploited area. Make sure franchise locations have deployed a business class firewall and not a product designed for the consumer marketplace. Firewalls should include a robust set of unified threat management capabilities like anti-malware, intrusion prevention, and URL filtering. While those capabilities are also provided in desktop AV programs like Norton, or even the browser itself like Chrome, doing that type of malware inspection at the gateway provides another layer of protection in case employees turn off the software on the PC, which we know happens. So this is your backup in case someone does that. He'll get caught by the firewall. It's also a great idea to publish firewall configuration guidelines that reflect your environment. Provide the franchise owner something they can give to their technical person or vendor. There are some good firewall policy templates available. Sit down with the corporate technical staff, fill one out, and send it to the franchise technical staff. Now, I'll warn you, this may stir it up a bit or a lot. This type of directive may be perceived as too much technical detail for some locations. However, they'll start to understand that managing to this level of technical detail is important to the business. They'll start to ask more questions and engage the right local resources. And this brings me to my next practical tip. Help the franchise locations develop a written policy. As you saw a few slides ago, lack of a written security policy is a common denominator of businesses that get breached. It was the #1 problem back on that slide. So make it easy on them. Give them a complete security policy and let them just fill in the blanks. Now there really needs to be 2 sets of policies, one for the employees and one for the company infrastructure, and both are very important. And this is a screenshot of our tool that shows you where you can download these templates. Here's an example of a company security policy downloaded from our portal. And it's done in Microsoft Word, so it's easy to do a search and replace. And providing this template to your franchises and encouraging them to use it will, again, spark the right conversation. They totally won't understand all the components, but they'll at least get in the game. And developing a written security policy is well outside the experience and resource level of most franchise locations. They'll really appreciate the guidance from corporate compliance on this one. My last practical step is to create a program to actively monitor Self-Assessment Questionnaire or SAQ status. Get everyone using the same tool to generate their SAQs. Now, many level 4s will struggle greatly with the SAQ. However, getting them, again, started is more than half the battle. Make a goal to have every location start their SAQ using a common tool set within the next 60 days. Then monitor that directive. Partner with a level 4 provider like ANX to circle back with franchise locations that aren't using the tool. A good partner will do that. If you're partnering with someone who just provided a portal tool and then walked away, it's time to revisit the relationship. Demand more. Now, you'll be significantly reducing risk when 100% of your locations have started the SAQ. Recognize this as a significant achievement. Send some percentage achievement notes congratulating the starters and encouraging the laggards. Something like, hey, congratulations everyone, we're 95% started. And conversely, Send one to the 5%. Hey, you're part of the 5% that hasn't started. How can I help you? The next milestone is to get everyone to complete the SAQ. Now that's going to take a lot more time. And don't get discouraged. Get determined and set reasonable goals with a cooperative level 4 partner. Almost done with the prepared remarks. Just want to take a minute or two just to let you know how we can help. So we're a managed security and compliance company with deep roots in security. We built and operate one of the largest B2B networks in the world. So really the North American automobile market has been securely collaborating over our network for over 12 years now with never a breach or a disruption to that network. So today we provide a broad range of security, compliance, and connectivity solutions to the retail, healthcare, and automotive sectors. And we're headquartered in Southfield, Michigan, and we have offices in Austin, Texas, Raleigh, North Carolina, and in the Philadelphia area. So we have robust capabilities in PCI Compliance Management. So we assist large and small companies with really all phases of compliance, beginning with scoping and continuing through assessment, remediation, certification, and maintenance. And we are a certified QSA and an ASV. There's our alphabet soup. Our flagship software as a service product to assist companies with managing PCI compliance is called TruePCI. I've been showing you screenshots from this tool throughout the presentation. It's easy to use and is a one-stop shop to manage PCI compliance. So it has the following capabilities. It can identify and track applicable regulations and internal standards. It obviously can do the annual self-assessment. You can meet the training requirements, and that's 12.6.1 and 12.6.2. So I showed you a few screens from that. You can do your required quarterly external vulnerability scans. You can track compliance status throughout the year, identify control deficiencies, and prioritize them based on risk methodology. And you can also manage remediation and chart progress towards organizational objectives. In addition to the TruePCI, we offer a complete managed security and compliance solution for level 4 communities called Secure Cloud Gateway. It includes a managed firewall with leading edge UTM features, file integrity monitoring, vulnerability scanning, and cloud-based remote access. And you can also purchase our award-winning remote access separately. And finally, we offer complete PCI consulting service through our highly trained QSAs. So we assist clients with gap analysis, implementation, PCI report on compliance, penetration testing, security device management, and much more. So we'd be happy to put our expertise to the test to help solve your challenges. So with that, that's the conclusion of my remarks. I'd be happy to take some questions, and I do thank you for your attention this morning. So Chad, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so thanks, Glenn. Great job on the presentation. Just wanted to go through, give you guys an opportunity to ask some questions. So to do that, please feel free to use your Q&A box on the WebEx to answer questions. I did get a couple of questions throughout the presentation, so let me start with those. So Glenn, to what extent should you be able to actually automate the PCI compliance process?
Quite a bit, actually. The tools that I described can be used to automate the scanning, the remediation and task management. So you can do your self-assessment questionnaire, and then you build anything that you're not compliant on. You can build yourself tasks for remediation and compensating controls. So it's designed to be a one-stop place with pretty high dose of automation, to really cut down the time it takes to do PCI compliance. You still have to be pretty technical and have your finger on the right answers, but using a tool such as what we have to offer, it's going to take you a lot less time and utilize a lot less of your internal resources because of the high amount of automation built into that tool set.
Great. I had another question about having a multiple location environment. Is each location required to validate PCI compliance?
Yeah, absolutely. So every location, everyone that has a merchant ID through an acquiring bank or ISO has to be PCI compliant. So that's a per merchant ID requirement.
Okay. I had a question about the gap analysis and vulnerability assessment. Can you kind of explain what those are and how they help?
Yeah, frequently, and this comes into play more so with the bigger type level 2s and 1s, but it can even be 3s and 4s, where the gap analysis is performed when to really understand the delta or the gap between PCI compliance and where that organization sits today. So we will come in with our QSAs, we'll write a scope of work, and we will produce a very detailed gap analysis, which could include the shortest, quickest path to plug that gap or remediate that gap. So that's one of the areas that we do quite a bit of, and we have a number of large clients that we've done that with. But now with the focus on level 3s and especially 4s from the banks, we're getting more and more requests all the time to do gap analysis for smaller merchants that are concerned with having some critical vulnerabilities that need to be addressed.
Great. Well, we want to be conscious of everybody's time, and please know that if you have any additional questions, that you can certainly contact us. We also, just to repeat, we will be sending out the presentation and the slides to everyone on the conference, so be looking for that. And if you'd also like any further information on this topic or any of ANX's PCI compliance and security solutions, you can certainly visit www.anx.com or call us at 1-800-658-8709. Have a great day, and thank you very much for joining.